The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.
Mike, it's good to be back on another episode of The Unlikely Innovators. And one thing that we often talk about on the show is mixed drinks and cocktails. And I think today we have the privilege of actually bringing that specialization of ours to the show. So today we got to go and visit Shane Prodan at Crosscut Distillery. Did you have a good time?
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, I said this to you and Shane when we were on site, that as far as in-person podcasts go, like, we've set the bar pretty high for ourselves because, you know, obviously Zoom has allowed us to, I think, reach a lot of people that we otherwise wouldn't reach. But now that we've kind of stepped into the real world, we did our first in-person podcast at Snow Lab, 2K Underground. And then our next one was at a distillery. So it's going to be hard to beat that. I obviously had a blast at Snow Lab, but having a chat with somebody with a nice Negroni in your hand is really tough to top. So no, it was great to talk to Shane. And again, Shane is the owner and head distiller at Crosscut, if you haven't visited yet. So again, we got to go there. Really great backdrop, I think, to the video. Again, I know this is obviously an audio and video podcast, but I would suggest tuning in on video just to get a glimpse of that bar and all of the nice bottles that Shane and the Crosscut team are producing.
Just a beautiful space. And one of my hopes was, as I was taking a sip of that Negroni, I know that they haven't made smell-o-vision yet or taste-o-vision to invent a word on the spot, but I think you could hear the ice sort of clinking around the glass, and I think that little hint of that sound might make it appealing to our listeners and our viewers. But just that was the marmalade gin we were drinking, and it was unreal.
Yeah, and I would say that I'm, I like to, I don't think I have a problem, but I enjoy a good Negroni from time to time. And, I think with that marmalade gin that Crosscut makes, like, that was probably one of the top Negronis for me. So definitely we had to grab ourselves a couple bottles on the way out. One each, sure. No more than that.
One each.
One each,
Who's counting? No one's counting.
No one's counting here, but no, they great products they've made, and that's what we talked to Shane about today, was some of the innovations they've done throughout the years. I think, one of the great things in talking with Shane, and you'll hear about this, we're not going to spill the beans too much, is just, what he envisioned for the business on paper, to what they're doing now and all of the things they've done in between. So again, we're not going to spoil it. We'll let Shane talk about that. So again, if you're listening, great. But if you're tuning in on YouTube, please enjoy the backdrop. And if you're local, definitely grab a drink at Crosscut and check it out for yourself.
Mike, one of the good things about being able to do these on-location shoots is we get to meet really awesome people and be in really cool locales. So I think we're going to start this episode by a quick cheers, and then we'll get into things. Cheers.
Cheers, guys. Thank you, Shane.
Oh, absolutely.
There we go.
That's the best way I think you could possibly conceivably start a podcast. So today we're obviously joined by Shane Prodan, who is the owner and head distiller at Crosscut Distillery here in Sudbury. And he was kind enough to lend us this space and talk to us today. So I think one of the things we like to ask at the beginning when we get things moving is just almost like that, what did you want to be when you grow up question, but we have a bit of a different take on it for you. So you've had an interesting career path so far, Health Canada, Canadian Food Inspection Agency. Now you own a distillery. Can you talk us, how that works? I'm sure you planned that out to a T, exactly how you got here. But how did that work? Can you talk us through how that went on paper?
I kind of liked, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because I'm like, I was 10, I want to be a distiller. But no, yeah, I have a mixed background, a mixed bag of degrees. And so I started off wanting to be a scientist, and that's what I was. I went through to be a toxicologist, which is a longer word for half chemist, half biologist. And got through school, was looking for work, started with the government, and I was a regulatory scientist for years. Got a little bored. Started taking classes in business at night. Got a little anxious again, switched from being a scientist to a policy analyst and a program developer. And one day, no one wanted this file, so they threw it on my desk, and it was the lead for alcohol for the Food Inspection Agency. So I had a mild interest. I just daydreamed too much at my desk. And at one point in time, my wife and I are both from Northern Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
At one point in time, my wife was offered a good job in Sudbury. So she's like, you always want to go back. This is your chance. But of course, you have to cut ties with, you got to leave those golden handcuffs behind. I had a good pension. And so here we are. I guess add on to it that I love building. I actually have a part diploma in cabinet making and contracting background, and it's a real hodgepodge. But that actually helped me build out the establishment with help from a lot of people. Obviously, build a brand, start distilling, and it's been a bit of a strange path.
Well, I guess on that note, when you mentioned that you went into like alcohol inspection and now we're here today at Crosscut, and we want to ask you the question, like, what made you want to get into business for yourself and distilling spirits? Was it always something you had a passion for, or do you think it was part of that path where you were kind of obviously in that space and that led you to this, or was it kind of part of this journey you've had?
I think my passion, I do have a passion for alcohol, and it's matured over time, no pun intended. But I think my passion's for the science. And so when my wife said, let's move back up north, like reinvent yourself, take some time, figure out something you'd really like to do, I looked at 10 different businesses that didn't exist in Northern Ontario. And sure, I tried a day of burning my hands making donuts. I thought about the idea of running a center where you have all these screaming kids on play structures, which is now the Cup Center in Sudbury. Sure. And I kept coming back to the most fascinating and least profitable of them all, which is a distillery. And so I took some more training, some more courses. And of course, I didn't distill on my own because you're not allowed to distill without a regulatory license, but lots of courses. And here we are.
Yeah. And I want to ask you about some of how you might use some of that early training as a half chemist, half biologist in toxicology. But this is sort of the elephant in the room now. What are we drinking here? Maybe describe that to us.
So this is an orange Negroni. So we make a marmalade gin. I made a Negroni with equal parts sweet vermouth, Campari, and our marmalade gin with a little bit of orange peel just to round it off.
It's dynamite. Yeah, they haven't invented any kind of any means of getting that out to the audience, but you can also just come here and buy it too. That's the other great thing. So interestingly, biomedical toxicology. Do you still use any of those sort of fundamental skills learned there? Obviously, you use the cabinet making. That was something I didn't know about you, but that's why it's the Unlikely Innovators.
Yeah, well, there's a certain part of me that still goes, I know what this is doing to your body and what it's doing in your body. But that's more academic interest. But the chemistry component is actually come out to play a lot more when you try and understand the science of, the biology of fermentation, but then you have all the chemistry and the physics that happen in the still, and then after you have the barrel maturation. It's a lot easier to read the textbooks when you understand the basics of what's going on. It's kind of a strange, I know it's a bit of a segue, but it's a bit of a strange industry because this is the only industry I've ever been able to think of that you can have postdocs making great alcohol and people who are completely illiterate making fantastic alcohol. And I can't think of another profession that's like that. I'd like to think that I'm halfway in between, but it's fascinating. It's you have a lot of people who distill, and even in Sudbury, there's a lot of distillers who come out of the woodwork just to ask some questions. So.
Well, on that note with the community, obviously opening a distillery, I can only imagine is a daunting process. I've never gone into business for myself, let alone open a distillery. So you've got all the logistical, nightmares that I'm sure come with having a business of this size. And you've got the storefront, you've got the bar and all of these things. But I like to think, as a Sudburyan, that when local initiatives happen, like we like to support those. I know that when Stack first opened, I switched to whatever I was drinking to Stack and I still do. Can you maybe talk about how the community, which, previously to this, or at least in my living in Sudbury, never had a distillery, at least in the official sense. Maybe there's one back in the day that I'm not aware of, but how has the community kind of rallied around Crosscut and supported you in this journey so far?
Yeah, like we we like to think that we might not be the first distillery, but we're the first legal one. I
got some stories from where I came from.
Yeah. There's definitely a couple of papas who've come in, giving me a little sample of their grappa and the like over the days. But the community has actually been pretty incredible. We've anywhere from contractors who've just offered a hand or some advice, some people who know how tough it is starting up, or when things break down, they've given us breaks, or even there's been a point in time where we couldn't. We had an unfortunate incident. It cost thousands upon thousands. The contractor looked at me. He's like, "It's fixed. You don't have the money, do you?" And I'm like, "I can get it." He's like, "Listen, don't burn yourself out. Get it to me when you can." And that only happens in a small community. We have some staunch supporters. Like, we have some regulars that are in all the time. I know that there are many people in this city who have a cabinet full of our stuff, and they don't drink near as much as what they buy. But they do it because they like the outing. They like coming to an event here. They like supporting us. We have one guy who brings our Christmas tree every year because he's just like, well, you need a Christmas tree for Christmas. And no strings attached. It's just like he likes to see it. He likes to see it take off and how it works out. And the breweries in town, too, they've been supportive. I think we're all kind of in the same boat, so we try and help each other out. It's been good.
Yeah, this Kelly Lake Road, for a time, I referred to it as the Distillery District, but perhaps we need a few more in order to actually cement that name for this area. One of the things listener of the podcast know that I get really into sort of the business side of the businesses we talk to, and one of the things I'm always interested by is a pre and post assessment. So if you could reflect, what does Crosscut look like compared to what you had on paper when you were doing business planning? And you could choose a story from that, because I feel that that's probably way different, but just to give us a sense of the pre and post.
I have a business plan. It's great. And that is what convinced Heritage, and thank you NOHFC for supporting, but that is what convinced them to get on board. But the game changed right away. They don't know this, and I didn't know this, but the rules change constantly, and that forces us to constantly change what we're doing. A bar was not permitted when we opened.
Oh, really?
We were allowed to do tasting at the bar, maybe samples at a table. That was it. Everything has changed so much over time, and now that the bar's a big part of what we do. It allows people to come in and try different parts of it. I think a big part, and this is my first foray into business, I think a big part of it is you don't know what you don't know until you're in it. And that was a big part of it. We didn't recognize what some of the limitations would be and what we could make. We ran some numbers for some products that we thought would be incredible, but then realized it wasn't feasible after the fact. But you also don't know what people want.
Yeah.
It's a business, and I can make everything that I would like to drink and go hungry pretty fast. The truth is, we have to put something out that other people want to drink. And so we've constantly had to shift what our offerings are. I never planned on making sanitizer. I never planned on making ready-to-drink cocktails. But this is all a part of what was needed at the time. And we'll continue to evolve. We have to.
Yeah, and you were saying off air before we started recording too, good luck guessing which one's going to be the next big one, right? And
yeah.
you said, the ones you find really good, sometimes that doesn't match up with what they want to choose, the consumers.
Yeah, for sure. I won't put down or put up any of our given products because
they're all great.
Other people prefer different ones to me, but I've even put one of our products that I'm really proud of that doesn't sell well into a competition because I need to know if experts in the field validate it the same way that I do.
Sure,
but yeah, it's good. It's we ran 12. It was a bit of endeavor. So at Christmas, we did the 12 weeks of Christmas, and every week released a different product, which is a lot in the distilling world. It takes us months to do any given product. But and then I had my bets on which ones that I thought would be hits and which ones that would be, okay. I was wrong on just about every single one. So, lessons learned. The market will tell us what is needed.
Sure.
But actually on that note, because obviously a lot of what goes into some of these different spirits is there's a lot of innovation that happens, right? And I think when I think about alcohol that I've had in my adult life, like back when we were first coming of age, drinking alcohol, like there was vodka and like that was it in that space. Now you've got all sorts of different ones. I look behind the bar and we've got the peppered bacon vodka, and you talked about the candy cane vodka at Christmas time. How do you kind of thread the needle between doing something creative and innovative that's good versus like the shock value of something just to kind of splash that in there, but no one's necessarily going to want to pick up on it because it's too far out there? How do you kind of navigate that?
Yeah, it's a good question, because we're a little bit different than the beer space, essentially, because beer, you had very light tasting beer and very flavorful beer, and we're competing against a different market, trying to get our little piece of it. You have to be cheaper, better, or different, and cheaper on our scale isn't an option. So we focus on the other two. We try to be better, we try and be different, and our approach is that we do one thing that sits pretty square in within expectations, and we try and make it as good as we can. So, for example, our triple grain vodka was one of our opening products, and then we take something that's off the wall and we see what the world thinks of it, like the peppered bacon vodka, and then we'll go back and do a gin that may be very innovative and something that goes back a little bit more traditional, and we try and go back and forth. Even in whiskey, we do the same, and some are bound to not be as good, but that's kind of the risk in trying to find something that's different. And besides, that's how we find our niche. If we find that one product or those 6 products that people keep coming back for that no one else makes, that gives us a whole different direction for the business. But yeah, you're right. We can go too far. I have one product in my head that I've never put out there. It's coming, but I don't think we'll do 100 bottles, and I think it'll sit forever.
But this is like one of those times where you think that, right? And then it's going to be that.
Yeah, it might be huge.
You never know.
Yeah, it's. I've been really wrong on a couple products. So, but yeah, you're right. It's. We have to find something different, and then but not too different. We can't alienate people, and we are in a very Northern Ontario is very traditional. If we're in Montreal, people would want the most outlandish thing possible right out of the gates.
Yeah.
So we had to get someone in here. We got to give them something that's approachable, and then say, "Hey,
if you
have 2 more spaces on your tasting board. Do you want to try 2 off the wall things?" And that's how we get them in to try something different. Maybe it sticks, maybe it doesn't, but we don't want to be just crazy all the time. You can't be.
Well, speaking of crazy, I wanted to ask you this because we were on a work trip a couple weeks ago in Windsor, and the hotel we were staying at had this Caesar that you can get, and it had like, I want to say, like, there was onion rings, chicken wings, like a piece of tempura,
a chicken,
and so we didn't get it because I thought it was like, this is too much. But by the end of the work trip, I'm like, now we have to try it because now I'm intrigued. And then on the way home on the plane, I was Googling images of like over the top Caesars, which apparently is a trend that I'm not in tune with right now. And there was Caesars with like lobster tails and whole chickens. Like, you're the expert in this space. Like, what do you make of that trend of overtopping these Caesars with like basically either entrees or hors d'oeuvres?
Well, that's it. I think that's it. I think it's fun, but you have to recognize that you're getting a drink and a nap.
Yeah.
Like, it's we've done some Caesar fixing events here and stuff, and people like to go a little crazy, but you have to also think you have half the kitchen on that cocktail.
Yeah.
Do people want to buy a $25 Caesar? And so we'd rather people just pick their app, but and pick the appropriate garnish. But it is I still think it's fun. Like, why not? We don't have a full kitchen back there, so you're not going to see a hamburger on top of a Caesar. But
I was skeptical at first, but I was into it by the end of we just couldn't get to the place that offered it. The line was too big, maybe for the Caesars or maybe just the night that we were there. But
it was Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah, that's true.
I actually, I'm ashamed to admit, but that was the first Caesar I had. I had a Caesar from another bar.
Well, I thought you were going to link to Dancing with the Stars.
No.
Like
We
first
talked about
Caesar-
this before. None of us are dancers. Well, I mean, maybe Mike
First
is.
Caesar ever? No.
Yeah, that was my first Caesar
Really?
ever
In your life?
in my whole life.
Come on.
Yeah, Pat was making fun of me, remember?
That's wild.
Yeah, and I had 2 of them, and they were delicious. And then I had another one the next day.
There you go.
Not to give too much away. I know this is a work-linked podcast,
Yeah.
so I'm going to come at. I have a knack for coming at things at a really crazy way, and hopefully I get to where I ask this next question. But when I think about Canadian whiskey, I think of like the Untouchables movie and like Prohibition, and like casks of whiskey coming in with Canadian flags on them.
Yep.
We're surrounded by, of course, I hit the mic stand. Paul's our awesome producer here. We're leaving that in. We're going to leave that perfectly in.
Yeah.
We're surrounded by a lot of beautiful casks here. Cask is the term, right?
Yeah. Cask, barrel.
Barrel. Yep. Wooden.
Good.
Barrel would have been the one I would have went
barrel
with.
is
Yeah,
probably
no, it's cask. We'll have on our legal forms up there. It's perfect.
Okay.
It's a legal
We're good.
term.
Either way.
He's good.
So Canadian whiskey is renowned, and people talk about Canadian whiskey. We even saw Dave Grohl at the Super Bowl did a whole commercial for Crown Royal, and talking about how it's their favorite. When you how do you embark on getting into that space, like getting into whiskey, and how do you differentiate coming into that market?
Yeah. So whiskey. I
Told you it was a roundabout way.
No, the Canadian whiskey and whiskey in general is it's a difficult thing to get into. So the first thing is we all know that you're looking at time. Canadian whiskey, you're looking at 3 years. In the U.S. bourbon, you're looking at a minimum of 2 years. And why that matters is if you put an experiment in a barrel, you got to sit and watch that experiment for a while, and it costs about $1,000 to fill a barrel. So, a small business, those are gambles. At the same time, if I put out a clone of Crown Royal, what's the point? What's the point of being here? So it's we again try and take the slightly traditional, but then slightly off. So we did a bourbon out of the gates. Can't call it bourbon in Canada, but we know what it is. But we put oats in it, and it gives a little bit of a silkier taste to it, feel to it in the mouth. We did an 8-grain whiskey, which is goes further away. Had purple corn and quinoa, and it's like the wild card. But then we realized that we're in CC or Crown Royal territory here, so people want to go out ice fishing and have their favorite, or out at camp and have something that's comfortable. So we do have to have something to go back to that. We have 100% rye that's unsweetened. We have more traditional Canadian whiskey in barrels. We haven't released any yet. And then we have to make a bit of a game day decision when it comes out. The one thing about Canadian whiskey that it's not such a dirty little secret, but essentially is that we're allowed in Canada to add caramel for consistency of color. But we all know caramel also sweetens things. So you'll notice that a lot of Canadian whiskeys are sweet.
Yeah.
Our take on it is that a whiskey doesn't have to be sweet. If you want it to be sweet, you'll make an old fashioned or you'll do something like that. So to date, we've never sweetened any of our whiskeys. In this industry, I can't say never to anything. We made a candy cane vodka, and 3 years ago I would have said, this will not happen in my shop. It was a hit. So, but yeah, like we have to kind of show people whiskey for what it is. We also make, ours are single barrel whiskeys. So we tap a barrel, that's what you get. And there will be variation from barrel to barrel. That's the reason you have master blenders. But it also lets people follow along and say, I really like barrel 2. What's this one like? I'm like, well, it's a little bit more peppery than barrel 2. And people get to try it out and see it on a small scale. Whereas if you're at a bigger Canadian whiskey distillery, they have lines of barrels or buildings of barrels of corn, one of barley, one of rye, and then they have someone whose job to very proficiently blend them so that you never notice the difference. And so we like kind of bringing people along with the adventure and kind of saying that, okay, this one will be coming out on this date, this is what it is. And people kind of enjoy following along. And some people even keep a bit from their last barrel to compare to the newest one and give their thoughts on it.
So you've approached Canadian whiskey, you've made it your own, and you've now sort of perfected that.
Perfection's a hot term.
Yeah. I should be careful.
We're working on it.
This is science. Yeah, that's right. So, well, that's great. No, that's super.
Obviously, Shane, like it takes a team to run a business. And, one of the things that we're interested in learning more about is obviously to find the technical team to help you scale the business. Obviously, we know that, at least speaking from the Cambrian perspective and some of the post-secs that we have here in Sudbury, that it's not necessarily that you can go in and take a program for this, right? And you mentioned taking classes previously, but in the North, where do you find the talent and how do you find the talent to help you guys scale and keep doing the great things that you're doing?
Yeah, so about half of our staff are in what we call the back of our business is split 50-50 for those who haven't been here. We have operations on one side, and then we have retail and sales on the other. So our staff are almost split the same 50-50. So when it comes to things like marketing and sales and management, we are lucky that we have the schools in town. I think the vast majority of people who currently work here are from Northern Ontario. I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head. I think we have one or two who are not. But on the distilling side, you're right. It's a bit of a challenge. When I started this, there was no distilling college or university program in North America. You had to go to the UK for it, which meant that most distillers were self-taught. Or they took courses here and courses there, or they bought the equipment and they went for gold. And it's a bit of a gamble. But so who do we hire? We hire someone who's keen, who's smart enough to understand the concepts, but no, it's not so smart that they're going to try to shrug things off. They still want to learn. And so we have my right hand who's been here for 4 years. That's exactly it. He came in, shook my hand and said, I need some work. He's like, I'll carry things. And now he mashes and distills. Then on the other hand, we have a gentleman who just started with us 5-6 months ago, I guess. And he was a head brewer in Honduras. So the first part of distilling is brewing. So he's a chemical engineer and a brewer.
Wow.
And we're
good combo.
Very fortunate to have him. And yeah, so he knows the vast majority of the business to start. The difference is we're on a smaller scale. So we have to kind of say, it'd be nice if we had all the great equipment on the big scale might have, but we're different here. And then we just have to start with the distilling for him. But who knows, the next guy or girl to come in the door may have a different skill set. And then we just try and work off of that. A science background helps, but just a willingness to learn is the biggest thing. And then it takes a while though.
And I just want to pick up on one thing on that. How before trades colleges were a thing, there was a lot of people would learn by apprenticing. Is that sort of how this market works too? Like, do they become something eventually? Like, if you say you're a distiller, what does that mean?
That's a good question. And actually the term, it's a bit controversial in my small world now. Who's a master distiller?
Right.
And there's no number of years of apprenticeship or work that make you a master distiller or a head distiller or a distiller or an assistant distiller. So I have to make up my own benchmarks for those. And do I think I'll ever hit master distiller? Not in my mind. But head distiller means I oversee distillers. A distiller means they can operate on their own. Assistant distiller means they can do most of it. Sure. And so we have to, it's almost like our own apprenticeship program. The prof at Niagara College who's teaching distilling, he's not a trained distiller. He's an environmental biologist.
Oh, yeah.
But he learned distilling from a distiller. And so Yeah, there's no true apprenticeship program.
Well, it's an interesting space for sure.
It really is. Home brewers, home distillers, home winemakers are quite often some of the best candidates, but they don't necessarily come with credentials.
Yeah. Like here's my license. Yeah. No, it's good.
It usually means they know how to clean things really well, which is a big part of the game.
Imagine. Yeah.
Well, I even think when cannabis became legal, you had all these people who had been growing it for years in their own ways, right? And all of a sudden,
who's that, Mike? Do you have any names?
I can't name names, but I'm just saying that they had the skill sets, and now it became legal, and suddenly you had access to talent that was now readily available, right? So
for sure, and you could see that when you go to grow professional grow ops. Some of those people, they definitely look like they were in non-professional grow ops before. But yeah, I mean the skills are undeniable, right? And just because it's a licensed area now, the skills are the same. So look, Shane, you've finished your drink. Mike and I need to catch up, which means we should probably stop talking. But what I wanted to do was, first of all, thank you for joining us on the podcast today. And what we want to leave our audience with is sort of a forward-looking statement. You sort of talked and teased us about some new products you might have coming out. What's next for Shane, and what's next for Crosscut that you to the extent you can tell us?
Well, it should be all planned out. We should have this 10-year plan, but I can tell you the last 7 years haven't gone anywhere near according to plan. The one thing I do know is true is every year something has changed things that we've had to I can't use the P word anymore, it's been overused, but we've had to change our tack. We've had to do something that's different because eventually our space is crowded. We have to differentiate constantly. So we started off with our bacon vodka. That was the first really kind of off the wall thing. So we do off the wall products. Fast forward a couple of years, we had to change or 1 year actually, we had to change our front of house because we're allowed to have a bar now. Mm-hmm. And the margins on sold drinks are a heck of a lot better than the margins on bottles.
Sure.
So that works in our favor. There's no money to be made in bottled alcohol. Spirits are heavily taxed. So anything outside of that is to our advantage. We started realizing people want to rent our halls or our space. Yeah. So we're a private bar for people at times. The world kind of fell apart. Sanitizer was in demand. Mm-hmm. We did sanitizer. The world kind of got back together, but Brewfest couldn't happen in physical settings, so they went virtual. We couldn't ship a cocktail to someone, so we started making RTDs or ready-to-drink cocktails in these sippy pouches.
That's interesting.
Yeah, they look a little bit similar to kids' drinks. We have to make sure that they're well labeled. Yeah. But awesome. The kids or the adults returning to their kids stage. And I guess that's the point. Is every year we've been open to the public for 5 years, and we constantly have to change. So to say what I think is going to happen next year, I have an idea of what whiskeys are going to be released, what new gins or vodkas or liqueurs we have planned, what barrels. We're supposed to have rum last year. You don't see rum behind the bar because things didn't go according to plan. But that's part of it. It's a bit of a give and take, and we'll keep changing. That patio happened with COVID as well, and that was different for us. Yeah. That changed us more into a traditional bar than we ever were before. So to be honest, I don't know.
Stay tuned.
We'll plan, and we'll go from there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if it's anything like the drink we've had today, I think you're going to be set up quite well. But really, thank you for lending us your time, your space, your story. It was fantastic to talk to you. Thanks for being on.
It's great. Well, thanks for coming.
Thanks, Shane. Yeah, appreciate it.
Cheers.
We're back, Steve. I could still taste that Negroni because, of course, it's the same day, so maybe that's why. I don't want to date the podcast, but yeah, that's I'm gonna go on a limb here and try something again. I hope it's not.
I love taking risks.
I don't want to be offensive, but it's borrowing it from Stanley Tucci, who said this in his book. So if you don't like
name drop,
I don't know him, so I don't think it's a name drop, but. But if it doesn't land, it's not my fault. It's Stanley Tucci's fault. So Steve and I were talking about, drinking a Negroni at Crosscut today with the marmalade gin. And Stanley Tucci had an analogy in his book. I think it's called Taste. And it was about Negronis. And he said, Negronis are like breasts. 1 is not enough. 2 is perfect. 3 is too many.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, unless you're in the universe of the movie Total Recall.
Yeah. Then of course you're in a good spot. But no, I mean, I guess we should I think we talked about it in the episode with Shane, or actually we didn't explain what's in a Negroni, but it's equal parts gin, Campari, and sweet vermouth. So again, it's all alcohol. So I would agree that 2 Negronis and you're feeling nice. And then I think after that, you start to veer off into dangerous territory. But it's such a great drink. I think the first time I had one, it was probably 10, 15 years ago, maybe. And I did not appreciate the combination of all of that booze together. But as I've, become a little bit more wiser and mature in my years, there's nothing quite like a Negroni at the end of a long work week.
Would you not agree also that the drink changes in your hand, even because as that ice melts, it starts to cut through that booze a little bit.
Yeah.
And it even matures everything going on in the glass. I think it's a journey. Every Negroni's a journey. And
oh wow, listen to you.
I know. And you're actually the one who got me onto Negronis. I wasn't really too aware of them before that. I would do an old fashioned here and there, but Negronis I've always been a gin lover. And obviously the one today really is catapulted into the top sort of 3 Negronis I think I've ever had. So
yeah,
and Shane said he wasn't a bartender. That was a really good Negroni.
It was very good. He even had the orange peel in there.
Yeah.
Certainly better than the Negronis I'm slinging at home. But the other one I'll say, just because this is obviously we share our thoughts and our deeper things inside our heads in the intro and the outro, mostly in the outro. I feel like we save all this.
We take liberties. We take liberties
in the outro. But the other one I'll say, just while we're on the topics of drinks for people that are listening, is that the other one that I go to beyond the Negroni is a Boulevardier, and that's with bourbon instead of gin. And I know that Crosscut, I don't know if they still make that bourbon. I know they're not allowed to call it a bourbon because it's made in Canada, but
yeah,
I'd be interested to see what that would taste like with that. I find it's a very nice drink too. It is on the sweeter side, I think, depending on what kind of bourbon you're using, but also a very tasty drink. But again, same rule applies. 1 to 2. That's all you need. No more.
I got to go get some more Campari, actually.
You can never have too much laying around the house.
Well, that's true. It's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Anyway, awesome pod with Shane. And like Mike said in the intro, do check it out. It's much more of a bar when they first open, so do take your friends and enjoy an evening there, because it's a great atmosphere. If you're getting married, they also do weddings and any kind of private bar rental. It's just a really great spot.
Yeah,
and summer's right around the corner. They also have a patio.
Summer's around the corner. I know we like to keep these podcasts evergreen, but this is coming out in February. So I mean, I appreciate the optimism, but I think we're almost there. But we still have March and April can always be a little bit hairy and stubborn. But nevertheless, I appreciate that sentiment, Steve. I think it's gonna, it's a sunny day now, so the Negroni is now made us I think a little bit more what's the word I'm thinking of? Thinking ahead, Steve.
Drunk?
No, I'm not drunk.
I'm just kidding.
Oh Lord. Yeah, now we're both fired. So thanks for listening to the Unlikely Innovators. It's been great bringing this to you up until now. But no, we're just kidding. But again, thanks to Shane and Crosscut for the hospitality today. We look forward to trying to figure out how we can top those last 2 in-person podcasts. We'll somehow find a way before the summer comes around the corner. But until then, we'll see you next week. Enjoy your week and maybe enjoy a Negroni at some point this week.
Bye.
The Unlikely Innovators with Mike Commito and Steve Gravel. Presented by Cambrian R&D and the Center for Smart Mining.